The Naval Aviation Museum displays approximately 150 naval aircraft that cover Naval, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard aviation history. This virtual tour covers the U.S. Naval Air Power progression starting from its first aircraft and taking you through the 1930s. The Curtiss A-1 Triad was the Navy's first aircraft. As it operated on land with retractable landing gear, on the sea with pontoons, and in the air, it was given the Triad nickname. The Triad was used for early training and aviation experiments, including the first attempt at a catapult launch. Curtiss's MF boat operated as both a training and as a support aircraft. When used as a trainer, it prepared naval aviators for anti-submarine warfare missions over the Atlantic. They operated at most naval air stations in the immediate post-war years. Curtiss's NC flying boat was designed as a long-range anti-submarine warfare platform. It did not see action because it became operational only after the World War I armistice. This aircraft, NC-4, was celebrated as it was the first flying boat to successfully cross the Atlantic Ocean. The Sopwith Camel was a British fighter that arrived on the Western Front in 1917. It was difficult to fly, resulting in more men losing their lives while learning to fly it than were lost in combat. Late in World War I, the Camel saw most of its action as a ground attack aircraft as foreign aircraft advanced to where it was outclassed as a fighter. The Navy obtained 6 Camels to experiment with shipboard aircraft operations, launching them from wooden platforms built above a battleship's gun turret. The Navy converted 10 French Henriette HD-2 seaplanes to wheeled land planes and designated them HD-1s. These were used for shipboard evaluation to determine how to launch airplanes from warships. The French Nieuport 28 entered combat service in June 1917 and served on the Western Front. Its wing surfaces tended to shed in prolonged power dives and the airplane was very unforgiving of pilot error, so the French operated only a limited number, making them available to Allies. The Navy obtained Nieuport 28s and used them in post-war evaluation, learning how to launch airplanes from warships. Curtiss's JN series Jenny biplane was originally produced as an Army Air Corps training aircraft. The N9 seaplane version served as naval aviation's foremost seaplane trainer. Following World War I, Jennies were popular barnstormers and provided public airplane rides. Thomas-Morse's S-5 Scout was a seaplane variant of the S-4 land version. Beginning in 1917, Scouts were the Navy and Marine Corps primary training aircraft. Fokker's D.VII was one of Germany's finest World War I fighters. It was very maneuverable at high altitudes and a deadly opponent. After the Versailles Treaty mandated the D.VII's surrender, the Navy acquired 6 and used them as Marine Corps trainers. Curtiss's N-2C Fledgling was the Navy and Marine Corps' primary trainer in the 1930s. Fledglings served mostly with Naval Reserve training squadrons, rather than at Pensacola, the Navy's main training center. 6 new standard aircraft NT-1s served the Navy and Marine Corps as simple rugged primary trainers beginning in 1930. Originally, the student and trainer sat tandem in a single cockpit that resembled a bathtub. Early training flights show the seating to be unwieldy, so the seating was replaced with the common 2-cockpit tandem arrangement. It served at NAS Pensacola and Quantico until retiring in 1937. The VE-7 Bluebird was the first airplane built by the Vought Company and served the Navy from 1920 to 1928. In 1922, a Bluebird made the first ever takeoff from a U.S. carrier. They took part in catapults tests to determine how to launch floatplanes from battleships and cruisers. Bluebirds were also involved in developing dive bombing tactics. Rigged with skyhooks, consolidated N-2Y Huskies were used to familiarize pilots with in-flight launching and recovery from rigid airships. The Navy considered that rigid airships could be airborne aircraft carriers. The two rigid airships, USS Akron and USS Macon, crashed, so the Huskies served as utility aircraft on seagoing carriers. In 1936, the Navy purchased one Lockheed 10A and one 10B Electra, which were designated R-20 and R-30 respectively. The R-20 was used as the personal transport for the Secretary of the Navy and is shown here. Curtiss's F-6C Hawk served an integral role in developing dive bombing tactics. The sturdy metal construction of their wings' leading edges allowed pilots to dive at angles up to 70 degrees, which made dive bombing more accurate. Hawks were the last naval aircraft to employ liquid-cooled engines. Curtiss's F-7C Seahawks marked the Navy's transition to air-cooled engines. While it was designed as a carrier-based fighter, it never saw the deck of a ship. The Seahawks served with the Red Devils, the Marines' first aerobatic stunt team, flying exhibitions around the country during the late 20s and early 30s. Boeing's F-4B was the Navy's first-line fighter from 1932 to 1938. At the height of their service, they equipped 5 Navy and Marine Corps fighter squadrons. From 1938 to mid-1941, the F-4B was used in the last phase of pilot training. Originally designated F-11C, this Curtiss Goshawk served on the Enterprise and the Saratoga during the 1930s. It was redesignated BFC-2 to recognize their role as bomber fighter aircraft. The Saratoga retained Goshawks that were piloted by the famous High Hat Squadron. Today, this squadron is known as the Top Hatters, and is the oldest continuously operating squadron in the United States Navy, having been in existence since 1919. The Grumman FF-1 featured major aircraft innovations including retractable landing gear and an enclosed cockpit. Affectionately known as Fifi, it had a top speed of 210 miles per hour, the fastest of any fighter in naval service at the time. It flew from the deck of the USS Lexington beginning in 1934 until it was removed from frontline service in 1936. Most Fifis were still in service with the Naval Reserve units until late 1940. Arriving in 1937, the Grumman F-3F served as the Navy and Marine Corps' premier fighter. Equipping 7 squadrons, it served on the carriers Ranger and Saratoga and with the Marine Corps. It was the Navy's last carrier-based biplane, operating from carriers until 1940. USS Langley was our first carrier. In early World War II, while ferrying P-40s to Java, she was attacked by Japanese bombers and had to be scuttled. I hope you enjoyed this virtual tour of the pre-World War II aircraft displayed at the National Naval Aviation Museum.